When Tusker Smalley died of a massive coronary at approximately 9:30 a.m. on the last Monday in April 1972, his wife Lucy was out, having her white hair blue-rinsed and set in the Seraglio room on the ground floor of Pankot's new 5-story glass and concrete hotel, the Shiraz. The Shiraz was only a step or two away from the little hill station's old hotel, Smith's, whose annex had been occupied by Tusker and Lucy for 10 years. The annex, known as the Lodge, was a small bungalow in what had once been an adjacent but separate compound, a second of whose dividing wall had been knocked down and a path trodden to create an illusion of connection between hotel and annex. The old gateway into the lodge's compound, now known as the side entrance, gave onto a lane. Immediately opposite was the Shiraz. If Tusker had been found at once, then, and a message sent across, Lucy would have had the news at just the moment any woman would subsequently have to think of as the most inconvenient at which to hear she had become a widow. At 9:30 she was going under the dryer. But Tusker lay dead for half an hour, and might have lain longer if Mrs. Boulaboy, who owned Smith's and lived in one of its principal rooms, hadn't become unnerved by the howling of Colonel and Mrs. Smalley's dog, Blocksaw. The howling was not very loud, because the dog was locked in Colonel Smalley's garage, but it was persistent, so Mr. Boulaboy was ordered over to complain on Mrs. Boulaboy's behalf. Mrs. Boulaboy, who had jowls and favoured saris in pastel colours such as salmon pink, which emphasized the fairness of her skin, was a martyr to several things, among them migraine. On mornings when she kept to her room, work at Smith's Hotel came virtually to a standstill. The slightest percussive sound was more than she was prepared to bear. The hotel was hers, Mr. Boulaboy merely its manager, whom she had married. Mrs. Boulaboy weighed 16 stone. Her husband was constructed on more meagre lines. Mr. Boulaboy had managed Smith's for years before the woman he married turned up as its new proprietor. He was her third and youngest husband. According to Tusker Smalley, probably the lucky one, because she was unlikely to enjoy a fourth, being now almost as richly endowed with killing flesh as with life-enhancing rupees. Tusker, who called Mr. Boulaboy Billy Boy, except when they had quarrelled, which sometimes they had to, said Billy Boy looked like a man who, inured to disappointment, had suddenly glimpsed an immense possibility and begun to organize himself so as not to make the mistake that would block his way to it. Mrs. Boulaboy had had no children by any of her husbands. "He stands to gain," Tusker had often pointed out to Lucy, "and he feeds her up a treat. One day she'll drop." Actually, Mrs. Boulaboy fed herself without either Mr. Boulaboy's help or hindrance. His policy was to minimize every risk of incurring her displeasure. These risks were many. On her good days, when she waddled about looking into this and that and finding fault, he followed in her galleon wake, in his neat, well-pressed suit, making sure her orders were carried out, and the sources of her irritation at once put a stop to. On her bad days, he walked on tiptoe, and had the entire staff doing the same, so that even the guests, when there were any, felt themselves under a cloud and got out of the place as soon as possible after breakfast.